Hello, we're going to be going through the review for Chapter 6 together for the quiz. Hopefully, just fast forward to the parts that you don't know how to do. Alrighty, the first one's the square root of 36. So one way we can do it, we can use our calculator. The square root button is this fifth button down, so we can go second and then that button, and then type 36, and we get 6. The next one is square root of 0.25, so we can do the same thing. Second, and then that square root button, which is the fifth button down, and 0.25, and we get 0.5. The next one, we need the cube root. So to find the cube root button, we need to go to Math and go down to number 4. And we need the cube root of negative 64. Click enter and we get negative 4. The next one is cube root of 8 over 125. So click Math, go down to the fourth one, and then 8 divided by 125 parentheses. Click enter. And notice it gives us a decimal. A lot of times if they have it in fraction, they want the answer in fraction format. If it's in decimal, put it in decimal format. So if you want to then switch 0.4 to a fraction, just click Math. Go to FRAC, stands for fraction. Click enter, enter, and it'll write it for us as a fraction. Alrighty, this next one is just a mixture of finding the square roots. So same as above, so square root of 49, we get 7. Square root of 0.36 is 0.6. Cube root of negative 125, so Math, go down to number 4. Negative 125, and we get negative 5. Alrighty, these next ones, notice how they now have the variables then. The variables we cannot put into the calculator, but the number itself we can still do using our calculator. So the square root of 25 we can put in our calculator. It's going to give us 5. And then we have 2y, so the square root of that is just y. Or we can start expanding them out. 5 times 5 times y times y. It's the square root, so we're putting them in groups of 2. So we have one group of 5 and one group of y, so 5y. Square root of 49x to the fourth. We have 7 times 7 and then 4 x's. We're putting them in groups of 2 since it's a square root. So we have one group of 7 and 2 groups of x's. Cube root of negative 8x to the ninth. So we can either put the cube root of negative 8 into our calculator, or you'll notice we have 3 negative 2's, 9 x's, and then we're putting them in groups of 3 since it's cube root. So we have one group of negative 2 and then 3 group of x's. This next one, the cube root of negative 0.125. So that part, if we don't know it, we can just use our calculator, go to Math, go down to cube root, and put negative 0.125, and it gives us negative 1/2. And then for the cube root, we can just go ahead for our variables, divide by 3, so we have y to the second power. Or another way, we could write out 6 y's and then put them in groups of 3, and we have 2 groups. For this next section, notice how when we put the square root of 600 into our calculator, it gives us a decimal. We should have no decimals. So instead, we want to do a factor tree, bring out what we can, leave everything else underneath. So then off to the side, I'm going to do a factor tree for 600. We have 6 and 100, 2 and 3, and then 10 and 10. Now I could break this down further. I can see I have a pair of 10s, and I want to put them in groups of 2. So I'm just going to leave them like that. I have 6 X's and then 3 Y's. Okay, I'm putting them in groups of 2. So I have 1 group of 10s, 3 groups of X's, sorry, 1 group of Y, times then the square root of what's left over, so 2 times 3, so 6, and then 1 Y. So that would be my final answer. Again, another way that I can do my exponents, since it's the square root, then I could divide these by 2. So 6 divided by 2 gives me that x to the 3rd power. Notice though my y's, 3 divided by 2 gives me a decimal. I don't want to put y to the 1.5 power. Instead, think I have 3 y's, so that's 1 pair, and then I have 1 left over. So I bring out 1, leave 1 underneath. Now the cube root of 54, we can try putting that into our calculator. See if we get a decimal. We do, so we want no decimals, so instead we're going to do a factor tree for 54. We have 6 times our 9 gives us 54, 2 and 3, 3 and 3. Notice how we have 3 3's, so we can bring out a 3. We're going to leave a 2 underneath. We have 1x, we need a group of 3 of them, so we leave the 1x underneath. We have 5 y's, so we can bring out 1 group, and then we'd have 2 left underneath. So then that would be our final answer. And again, if you still need to expand out the y's, so you can see that, you can do so. So you have 5 y's, you're putting them in groups of 3. So you have 1 group, so you bring out that y to the 1st power, and then you have 2 left underneath. This next one, we are taking the 4th root, so we're going to want to do our factor tree for 64, and then we're putting them in groups of 4 since it's the 4th root. Notice we have 6 2's, we have 4 x's and 8 y's, so we're putting them in groups of 4. So we have 1 group of 2's. If we divide each of these exponents by 4, we'd have x to the 1st power, and then y to the 2nd power. And then we have 2 2's left over, so 2 times 2, we get 4. And that would be our final answer. This next one, number 15 and 16, it says find the 2 real solutions of each equation. So we're solving these. So we want to get the exponent by itself. So we're going to add the 4 over.
Hey, Mommy.
Hey, buddy.
What's that for the point?
Okay. I'm making a video, okay?
So I want to
You can watch.
I might have to work on computer. I can work on computer. And I have to work on paper.
Yep. We got to be quiet so Mom can make my video, okay?
Okay.
Alrighty, so we add the 4 over, so our 4's cancel out, so we have 9x squared equals 4. Then we're going to divide by 9 on both sides. So we have x squared equals 4 9ths. And then we want to undo to the 2nd power, so we need to take the square root of both sides. So we get x equals plus or minus. The square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 9 is 3. Or we could have put that into our calculator and got that same answer. So to put in our calculator, 2nd, and then the square root, put 4 divided by 9, gives us a decimal. So go to math, fraction, enter, enter, and it gives us 2/3. And then this one is to the 4th power, so we want to take the 4th root of both sides. The 4th power and the 4th root cancel out, so we get x equals plus or minus. And then we want to take the 4th root, so we're going to type in a 4, go to math, go to where it's the x root, and then put in our decimal. And we get 0.2. Alrighty, this next one is a multiplication problem. So what we need to make sure when we're multiplying is the roots have to be the same. So if we have a square root and a square root, we can multiply them. But if one's a square root, one's a cube root, we would not be able to multiply those. So both of these are square roots, so we're going to be able to multiply them. So we multiply what's on the outside of the radical on the outside, what's underneath on the underneath. So for this one, we just leave our square root. We have 2 times 18. So we multiply those. We get 36. We have 1x here, 1x here. So when we're multiplying, we add our exponents. So x to the second power. We have 2y's here, so y to the second power. Now we've went ahead and multiplied, but we still need to simplify. So then we're going to do our factor tree. We have 6 times 6. We have 2 x's and 2 y's. So we bring them out in groups of 2. So then our final answer would be 6xy. Alrighty, now this next one is a division problem. So the first thing I would want to check to see, does it divide evenly? So if we take 32 divided by 4, divides evenly, notice the larger number is in the denominator. So when we make our fraction, our larger number needs to be in the denominator. So our 8 is on bottom. You can put 1 on top or you don't need it. And then we have 4 x's on bottom, 1 on top. So when we're dividing, we subtract our exponents. We have more on bottom, so the 4 minus the 1 goes in the denominator. And then we have 7 y's on top, 4 y's on bottom, so 4 of them cancel out. We have 3 y's left in the numerator, or on top. And then from here, we still haven't simplified it, so we need to simplify it further. So think expanded form, we have 3 y's. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2, and then x cubed is 3x's. We're putting them in groups of 3. So our final answer would be y divided by 2x. Alrighty, this next division problem, check to see if it divides evenly. It does divide evenly, so we want to divide first. So 20 divided by our 5 is 4. We have 3 x's on top, 1 x on bottom, so one of them are going to cancel out, and we have 2 left in the numerator. So then we have the square root of 4x squared. We've divided, but then we still need to simplify it. So square root of 4 is 2 times 2, then we have 2 x's. We're bringing them out in pairs, so our final answer would be 2x. This next one, when we take 56 divided by 7, notice how we get a whole number, 8. So we're going to want to go ahead and divide first. And then we have 4 x's on top, 3 x's on bottom, so 3 of them cancel out. We're left with 1 in the numerator. And then we have 1 y on top, 1 y on bottom, so they cancel out, and we have no y's left over. So then we're left with the cube root of 8x. We want to still simplify it, so factor it out. Bring them out in groups of 3. So we have one group of 2, so we would have 2 times the cube root of x. We can't bring our x out because we don't have a group of 3 of them. This next one, 32 divided by 2, it divides evenly, so we want to go ahead and divide. We end up with 16, and then we have 7 a's on top, 3 a's on bottom, so when we subtract those, we have 4 a's in the numerator. We have 2 b's on top, 1 b on bottom, so we subtract those, and we have 1 left in the numerator. Then we want to simplify it. So 16 is 4 times 4. We have 4 a's and 1 b. We're bringing them out in groups of 2. When we bring out the groups, we're going to multiply those. We have 4a squared, and then we leave the 1b underneath. Now, the next problem is addition and subtraction. For addition and subtraction, the roots have to be the same, and then what's underneath needs to be the same. So these index numbers, like this cube root, and square root, would all have to be the same in order to add or subtract them. So we're not going to be able to combine it with this first one. And then from here, what's underneath also has to be the same. So let's go ahead and simplify these first. So 180, if we make our factor tree, we would have 18 and 10. 18 is 2 and 9, 3 and 3, and 10 is 2 and 5. Notice how we don't have a group of 3, so that is reduced. We can't reduce that any further. 45, we're going to make a factor tree for it. We get 5 and 9, 3 and 3. And this one's square root, so we have a pair of 3's. So that would be 3 square root of 5. And then 20, we're going to make a factor tree for 20. That's 4 and 5. And then 2 and 2, we have a pair of 2's. So that would be, we're bringing out a 2. There's already a negative 8, so negative 8 times 2 is negative 16. And then that 1 5 that we have left over, we're going to keep underneath. Now these last two are the same. They're like terms, so we can combine them together, square root of 5 and square root of 5. So we're going to leave this first term alone. And then positive 3 minus 16 is negative 13, square root of 5. Now this next one, notice how we're dividing, but we have two terms in the denominator. Whenever you have two terms in the denominator, we can't leave a radical first off in the denominator. That's not reduced. So how we're going to get rid of them, we're going to multiply by the exact same two terms. We're just going to switch the sign to its opposite. So 2 plus square root of 3. Now if we multiply that across the denominator, we also need to multiply that across the numerator. So we're going to go ahead and FOIL or distribute. And what we should see happening in the denominator, our radicals will end up canceling out. So we're going to distribute this 2 to both of these terms. So 2 times 2 gives us 4. 2 times square root of 3 is 2 square root of 3. Then we're going to distribute this negative square root of 3 to both of these terms. So negative 2 square root of 3 and then negative square root of 9. Now we're going to multiply this 5 to both terms. So 5 times 2. 5 times square root of 3. Now distribute this square root of 3 to both of these terms. So we have 2 square root of 3 and then plus square root of 9. Now we want to reduce this. So we leave our 10. These middle two terms are like terms, so we're going to combine them when we get 7 square root of 3. And then square root of 9 is just 3. And the denominator, notice the middle terms are going to cancel out. They're opposites. So we have our 4, and then minus square root of 9 is 3. And then we want to keep reducing it. 10 plus 3, we get 13, plus 7, square root of 3. Then 4 minus 3 is 1, so we do not need to divide by 1. So that would be our final answer. Alrighty, if we flip to the back side, there's some more simplifying with our adding and subtraction. So this first one, notice they're like terms. They both have the square root of 7 at the end. So we can put a 1 in front of this one. 1 square root of 7 plus 3 square root of 7 is just 4 square root of 7. Now this next one, it looks like it's going to be does not simplify, but before we can put that, we want to simplify each term and then see if they're like terms. So if we make our factor trees, we have 2 and 9, 3 and 3. We have a pair of 3's. So 3 square root of 2. And then we're going to go over here, make our factor tree for 32. We get 2 and 16, 4 and 4. Notice we have a pair of 4's. So we'd have 4 square root of 2. And then these are like terms, so we can simplify it further. So we'd have 7 square root of 2. This next one is cube roots. The number underneath is not the same, so initially we think it would be does not simplify, but let's do our factor trees. Now this one we're bringing them out in groups of 3. So notice we have a group of 3 2's, so we can bring out a 2. There's already a 2 out here, so we're going to multiply those and get 4 times the cube root of, and then this 3 that we have left over. And then we do our factor tree for 81, so 9 and 9, 3 and 3, 3 and 3. We have a group of 3's, so we can bring out a 3, and then we have that 3 that's left over. And then these are not like terms, or they are like terms, sorry, they're cube roots of 3. So we can combine them. 4 minus 3 is just 1, and then we leave the ending alone. So 1 cube root of 3, or you can just put cube root of 3. Now this next one we have negative 125 to the 2/3 power. So one way we can do this, we can put it into our calculator, exactly how it is. So negative 125 is going to be in parentheses, then put our caret to the 2/3 power, and we get 25. So our answer would be 25 for this one. The next one, 81 to the 3/4 power. again put that exponent in parentheses. We get 27. 32 to the 0.6 power. We get 8. And the next one, 49 to the 1.5 power. 343. Alright, these next ones, it says write each expression in radical form. So it's in exponential form. We want to switch it to radical form. So we're going to have our base is x, so we put that underneath the radical. The denominator is always our root, so it's the cube root. Our numerator is then our exponent. And we can put x to the first power, or we can just leave that as x. We can't reduce this, so this is our final answer. This next one, our base is x, so we put that underneath the radical. Our denominator is 4, so it's the fourth root. Our numerator then is our exponent. We can't simplify that, so that is our final answer. Now this next one, notice it's to the 1.5 power, so I'm going to switch that to the 3/2 power. And if you don't know what 1.5 is as a fraction, just put 1.5 in your calculator, go math, fraction, enter, and it gives you 3/2. So then we're going to put the x, our base, underneath. Our denominator is our exponent, and our numerator is our exponent. And then this one we have 3 x's. We can bring them out in groups of 2, so we want to reduce it, so it would be x square root of x as our final answer. Now these last ones, it is going to be in this radical form, and they want us to switch it to exponential form. So for this first one, we can put it in a couple different ways. That 4x squared, we can put it in parentheses, and then put it, our root, or index number is our denominator, and then the exponent would be 1. So we can write it like this, or we could distribute that 1/3 and have 4 to the 1/3 power, and x to then the 2/3 power. Power to power, we'd multiply those. So either of these answers would be perfectly fine. This next one, again, we could put it in the first form, so 5ab. It's the square root, so 2 goes in the denominator, and then our exponent would just be 1. Or we could distribute that and have 5 to the 1/2 power, a to the 1/2 power, and b to the 1/2 power. Again, either of these answers would be perfectly fine. This last one, we can put 65a x to the 4th y. Our exponent, or our index number, would be 2, so that's in our denominator, and then our exponent would be 1, so to the 1/2 power, or we could distribute that. Power to power we multiply, so 4 times 1/2 would just be 2, and then y to the 1/2 power. Alrighty, hopefully this helped. Please do let me know if you have further questions in class.